VMware Explore Barcelona Day 3. John, the final interview of the day. We have saved the best for last. My good friend Cormac Hogan. How you doing, sir?
Hola, Pete.
3 beers, please. Bring them. Let's go.
Busy day.
You look great, man.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So.
Appreciate it.
At our darkest hour, the White Wizard approaches, and we look to the dawn. So.
What have you been up to these days?
Oh, Data Services Manager, man.
Oh yeah,
have
the
you
data.
Heard about it?
I think I have. We've heard a couple of things, but I haven't truly heard about it until I talked to you about it.
No, I've been working on that for the past year, would you believe? So
really?
I've been all over EMEA sowing those little seeds of Data Services Manager, but based on the version 1.x of that product. But of course, yesterday we had a big announcement about DSM 2.0.
Right.
So it's a complete re-architecture and lots of new partners to talk about as well.
Good. So give me the deets. We'll start super high first. What is Data Service Manager? But then I want to know what was the differences between 1.0 for those that have tried it, and what are we looking at in 2.0?
Sure. So essentially what Data Services Manager is a way for vSphere administrators and what we might call data administrators, maybe DB admins, for those two to have a kind of seamless relationship when it comes to consuming vSphere resources when data services are being deployed on vSphere. So we have a few new concepts in DSM 2.0. Main one would be a thing called infrastructure policies that allows a vSphere administrator to carve out a bunch of vSphere resources. They can then hand those off, knowing that whoever is provisioning data services can only provision onto that subset of vSphere resources.
So I like it.
They can't just spam all over their whole vSphere infrastructure.
So it's like carving a LUN almost, right? Back in the day.
Yeah,
like a resource group or
a resource group. There we go.
Yeah. But it means that you can have lots of these infrastructure policies, hand them off to different teams if they're different teams or different business lines of business who wanted to do different types of data services, and you know that they're not going to step on each other.
Okay, but are they doing API calls to provision their own stuff? How does that work?
Well, there is a whole portal UI where you can click through everything, but underneath the covers, it's Kubernetes. So there's anything you can do with Kubernetes. We will extend it for objects that are part of Data Services Manager. Just do the same thing there.
So that's a big change from 1.4 and 1.5, because I actually built the hands-on lab for the existing one branch, and that was a lot of VMs and under the hood. So
it was. So in the 1.x version, what we used to do when there was a data service that was required, we would spin up the VM. Like
there are OVAs sitting in the repository,
and then we'd put a container image of whatever data service it was. We would just use containerd and spin up that image as for all intents and purposes, a container running in a VM.
So with the original, the clustering services was primarily done at the app layer, but you now have basically a Kubernetes construct. Is that a Kubernetes of one node, or is it going to spin up multiple nodes? How is that?
So it depends on the type of data service you're looking for. If you're looking for a standalone data service, it's a single node Kubernetes cluster that we build on, and then we have Kubernetes operators for all of the data services. So we'll just spin out Postgres, MySQL, whatever it is on top of that. But if you did want to cluster, we have 3-node, 5-node support. So we build a 3-node Kubernetes cluster for replicating data services, or a 5-node if you want to go completely nuts and have lots of
Okay, but this is a Kubernetes cluster that is dedicated strictly to just a DSM. This is not like, I've got my whole Kubernetes.
No. So we are actually provisioning that Kubernetes cluster for you. We're not expecting.
So I don't need to be the Kubernetes expert. I don't have to call Kelsey Hightower. Okay.
Exactly. So the initial DSM is a single appliance. It's an OVA. We provide you with a UI. You can get in there if you want to deploy out a data service. It will then spin up the Kubernetes cluster for you.
So once I say I want 3 replicas, or I want it'll scale out versus I just need one copy of the database. It'll rely on the inherent resiliency of vSphere HA in that case.
Absolutely. So they're VMs at the end of the day. That Kubernetes cluster is still a set of VMs, so you can use all of those vSphere services that we know and love. But we have built-in replication for the data services as well. So if there's a failure on an ESXi host or a VM or the drill, we still leave the data service to be available.
Okay, so it seems like from a vSphere administrator perspective, nothing changed.
Well, the big thing is this infrastructure policy. So we now have a vSphere plugin for DSM. So basically, the vSphere administrator will continue to work in the vSphere client like they always have done.
Well, see, that is a big difference, because before, this was all, you had to go log into the supervisor, manage it all there.
Yeah, we had these different personas of org admins and org users and that kind of provider admin. No, so that goes away now. So now your vSphere administrator will carve out the resources. Those resources will bubble up in the DSM UI, and then your data admin or DB admin, whoever wants to provision resources, they'll see those.
The infra admin is the infra admin, which should live in vSphere, since we're already virtualizing everything there anyways. But this sounds like it's going to help try to raise visibility of databases into the vCenter UI.
Yeah, it's not just databases, right? It's and we made some announcements yesterday at the keynote. So absolutely databases. We think databases will be probably the big data service, but we also announced a partnership with Min.io to do object stores as a data service as well.
And that's their full commercial distribution that you can bring in there.
TBD.
So. Yeah.
TBD. So we're going to have tech preview. I don't know exactly what we will be showing in that tech preview, but we will figure that out.
Well, but they have a lot of nice tooling.
Absolutely,
and this is the nice thing with going with these commercial partners is, there can be additional support models for that. So
for sure.
The native services we have, obviously, we can support, but there's going to be a lot of engines and things people want to do.
Absolutely, and there's some that come up all the time. I mean, I think I must have heard half a dozen times about when would we do Mongo or one of those kind of ones. But I think.
What about Foxit?
Yeah. That was DB2.
Probably.
No, we shouldn't joke. But I think the really nice thing about all of this is it's not just the day zero deployment of those data services. It's like all of the day two operation stuff that we can do through that portal.
That really was exciting, seeing of I can declare a maintenance window and this will handle my patching, security patching, it'll handle indexing, other stuff. So
absolutely.
So Cormac, you've been here all week then, talking to customers and talking to partners. What's the key feedback?
That this is exactly the product we need in our environment. We were talking earlier about not having visibility into what's being deployed. There's these weird VMs that maybe nobody knows what they're doing, and being able to provide this visibility into what's running in those VMs, because that's exactly what we're doing with that vSphere client plugin for DSM, is we're bubbling up exactly what's being provisioned as a data service and showing that in the vSphere client. So now, at a glance, you can see exactly the type of data services that are being provisioned on your vSphere infrastructure.
Is it fair to say, because I remember with the data persistence platform, and even further back, just Tanzu in general, there's always been this discussion of Kubernetes environments don't want to talk to vSphere administrators. vSphere administrators are totally focused on the compliance and the operations and the management, and I'm sure VMware, taking that into consideration in their design, did some of those early experiences with Tanzu play a role into the design of DSM?
I couldn't 100% say for certain whether they did or not, but what I will say is that we're taking care of that Kubernetes, or all of those Kubernetes clusters. So we're provisioning either a single node Kubernetes cluster if you want a standalone database, or multi-node Kubernetes clusters if you want to have replicated
The work
databases.
we did on Cluster HA kind of comes through there. So
yeah, but I think so we're not relying on anything externally to do those Kubernetes clusters. There's no external load balancer. There's nothing like that. We're using kubevip. Everything is built in.
Keep it nice and simple on the networking.
Yeah. So vSphere CSI driver, all built in. But we are doing all of the lifecycle management, not just of those data services, but of that Kubernetes cluster. So really, we should think of that data service as the database, or whatever you may call it, that's running in pods and PVs, but also the Kubernetes cluster itself. So all of that lifecycle management we are taking care of.
It's cool that this is on Kubernetes, and it explains why it's going to, work reliably, so to speak, and pretty consistently in a consistent manner. But it's also, at the end of the day, an implementation detail that if you don't really want to learn Kubernetes as the VMware administrator, you should be able to stand this up.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the day where there are certain environments where you might not even be aware of the fact that this is running on Kubernetes.
You're absolutely right.
Have to worry about that.
But having said that, you could absolutely have a vSphere administrator being the data service administrator and rolling out those services. through a UI or through ARIA automation or something like that. But conversely, you could have developers, end users who really get off on doing Kubernetes stuff. So all of the objects that we have in Data Services Manager are bubbled up in Kubernetes. So if they have access to the kube config and they like using kubectl, and for some weird reason they love YAML, they can absolutely do all of that stuff as well.
This is going to help simplify the data center because there is no proliferation of weird like bespoke platforms for OSs and even Shutter, people doing things like bare metal, than it is for databases and random scale out data engines and things. It's they become those remaining, like, what is that over there? That's Bob's Island. We try not to make contact with it, but
right. Yeah, I agree.
Nice.
I agree.
So I wanted to ask about automation here. So we've talked about you can obviously access by Kubernetes. Is it going to be easy to address this within some of the other automation frameworks like VRA or VCD or things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a plan to make custom resources for the DSM objects that we'll just host up on GitHub or something like that. So if customers wanted to put those into some sort of ARIA automation pipeline, they can just pull down that custom resource. They can tweak it whatever way they want. So maybe there's certain parameters that they'd like to show their end users. Maybe there's some that they'd like to hide from their end users.
Yeah.
They can control all of that.
Make sure the backups are always enabled. Don't trust the end customer to do that.
Perfect.
But
a perfect point. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we will. So it's not fully embedded. It will be a custom resource, but I think custom resources sometimes are easier to deal with because you can tweak them to whatever you need to do yourself. So absolutely, and you can stick all of that then into a catalog. So if you're already running database as a service or even application as a service, but there's a database as a part of it, all of that stuff
there's going to be some opinionation as more and more data services come into the fold here anyways, so it makes sense that those be custom.
Yeah.
So VCF announced that it was 5.1 was announced this week, but it was also GA'd. When can we expect DSM?
So because we have announced it, we have revenue recognition that we need to meet. So I don't know if I can share the GA date yet, but it has to be in a particular short time frame from yesterday. And you can kind of probably work it out.
Watch that space.
Yeah. Generally, when things get announced, they show up in the same fiscal quarter. You're welcome to go look at some calendars that are publicly available. And
exactly.
But as a reminder, our quarters do not align with calendar years. They are slightly weird.
Yeah, but very soon, Pete.
Very nice.
Very soon.
Very exciting. This has been a great conference. I'm glad we finished with our good friend Cormac Hogan. For more information, Cormac's amazing blog is listed below on this on the video of this and in the show notes of the podcast. Cormac, thanks for joining us on the podcast as always, man.
Pleasure. Must be sangria time?
It's time. It's time for tapas and sangria. Cheers.
Take care.